Good evening. My name is Ute Fendler. I'm the Vice Dean of Internationalization of the cluster Africa Multiple, and it is my great pleasure to be the chair of this first keynote session this evening. I'm very happy and honored that I can welcome two extraordinary colleagues, Professor Fatou Sow from University Sheikh Anta Diop in Dakar, who was willing and who accepted to give the keynote address tonight to open our conference. And also I would like to welcome our colleague from University of Ghana, Akosua, Adomako, Ampofo. Before we can start, I would just like to say a couple of words about the procedure for this panel, as this is the first one also with translation. There will be an introduction first by Akosua, Adomako, Ampofo. Then we will start a video because the conference, the keynote by Professor Sow has been recorded beforehand. It is in French and it is subtitled in English. Afterwards, we can have questions and answers. Professor Sow will answer in French. You can ask questions in French or in English in the chat that I will read in these languages. And at the bottom of your screen, you will find the icon for interpretation. So you will always have then the direct translation from French to English or English to French. So far about the procedure, but now I would like, I'm not sure if the interpreters already started, but just to, as a beginning, je voudrais bien donner la bienvenue aussi à la professeure.
I would like to wish a warm welcome to the professor of Sheikh Honorary, and we are very honored to have you here amongst us today, and we are impatiently waiting for your conference later. But first of all, I'm going to pass the word to my colleague, Dr. Woso, who is going to introduce this conference to us.
The introduction to the conference and also to our keynote speaker, Professor Fatou Sow. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you very much, Ute, for that welcome. Thank you. Good evening to colleagues. I'm not going to go through all the protocols again. I'm sure everybody already feels very, very welcome. I am going to take the liberty of sharing my screen, and this is because I want to honor ma grande sœur. It's no exaggeration to say that I'm absolutely delighted, and I was very honored to be invited to introduce Professor Fatou Sow as this evening's speaker. She's highly respected and deeply admired. The pictures on the screen that I will be sharing with you were taken in 2013 during the 50th anniversary celebrations and an international conference at the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana, where Professor Sow and Ngugi wa Thiong'o were our special guests during that conference. And we held a special open session with high school students that both professors graciously agreed to address. Ma grande sœur Fatou was a hit with the students. I say this by way of introduction to show that Professor Fatou Sow is both sophisticated and also down to earth, gracious, and with an engaging sense of humor that enables her to cross generations. I was director at the Institute of African Studies at the time, and in the conference, some students made a portrait of Professor Fatou Sow, and I'd like to also remind her of the times that we shared together, also with Professor Techua Menu, who was my predecessor as director. I cannot remember exactly when I first met Professor Fatou Sow, but her reputation as a feminist scholar who has worked at the forefront of women's rights. Let me stop sharing my screen, I'm sorry. There we go. Who has worked at the forefront of women's rights in West Africa and Senegal specifically, and globally more generally, had preceded her for me. Born in Dakar when Senegal was still a French colony, Fatou Sow was among the very few women to enter the university in Senegal in the late 1950s. She started her career at the Department of Sociology of the Faculty of Arts and Human Sciences of the University of Dakar in 1966. A few months later, the Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique in Paris recruited her as a researcher based at the University of Dakar. And those of us familiar with the Francophone relations will know how this worked. When the Department of Sociology was shut down in the aftermath of the May 1968 student revolts, and sociology was removed as a discipline from the academic curricula, she joined the Centre d'études sociologiques at the CNRS in Paris. After receiving her PhD in sociology at the Sorbonne in 1969, Fatou Sow returned to Dakar and took up the position at the Institut Fondamental d'Afrique Noire, IFAN or IFAN for short, while continuing to maintain her affiliation with the CNRS. In the early 1990s, she became a member of the CNRS-based Laboratoire SEDA, Société et Développement dans l'Espèce et dans le Temps. Please forgive me, I'm not a French speaker, of Denis Diderot University in Paris. She received her Research Director Habilitation in Sociology, a very prestigious recognition, if I may say so, from the same university. Reflecting the preoccupation of African social sciences at the time with the new independent nation states, Fatou Sow's first book, Les fonctionnaires de l'administration centrale sénégalaise, published in Dakar by IFAN, was a study of the making of the state and the role of new elites in the nascent Senegalese republic. She has remained a passionate researcher throughout her career, conducting fieldwork in various parts of Senegal on a wide range of topics, including the legal and economic situation of rural and urban populations. Even though she had produced scholarship on women's issues as far back as the early 1960s, she took on a more systematic focus on gender in 1973, when she presented a paper titled Les femmes africaines et la division internationale du travail at the first conference of the Canadian Association of African Studies at Carleton University in Ottawa. Shortly thereafter, she published Femmes, Socialité et Valeurs Africaines, and this was also published by IFAN in Dakar in 1976. The mid-1970s thus marked a more obvious landmark in her extraordinary and unabating commitment to the cause of African women in and outside of the academy. In the subsequent 5 decades, Professor Sow attended innumerable workshops and conferences all over the world, where she challenged the status quo of the condition of African women in her keynotes, her lectures, and roundtable appearances, and of course in numerous conversations that were in less formal settings. Starting in the 1980s, interestingly, several sojourns in the United States as a Fulbright scholar at the University of Maryland in 1980 and at the University of California, Los Angeles in 1984, as visiting professor of the Great Lake College Association in 86-87, Boston University in 94-96, from 1994 to 1996, and in Canada at the University Laval, Quebec in 1996, these were important in shaping Fatou Sow's identity as an African feminist. And I say interestingly because this formation was happening outside the continent, and you will realize why as I go forward. She realized that the conditions of African women were not contemporaneous with the fight for women's rights in the global north, as much as European and North American feminists tried to absorb international, including African feminist thought and movements in their own agendas. As Fatou Sow emphasized in the early debates about African feminism in the 1970s and 1980s, most African women denounced the colonization of research and demanded decolonization. And so for our younger members of the audience who think that decolonization is a recent agenda item, African feminists have been doing this from the onset, and Fatou Sow was one of these. They acquired, that is African feminists, including our keynote speaker tonight, they acquired, considered access to education as something that was extremely important, access to economic resources, political participation, and equal rights were as important as many of the theorizing discourses that were going on, if not even considered as more important. And we're looking at issues like patriarchy and so on, which were very much on the table at the time. Reproductive health mattered more to our senior feminist scholars at the time than so-called sexual liberation. Fatou Sow has made momentous contributions to these oftentimes contentious debates, both as a scholar in her writings and as a public intellectual and activist. Her interventions have been instrumental in establishing African feminism as a distinct movement and in connecting it to the struggles of women all around the globe, while debating Western feminism and contributing to theory at the same time. Her most important publications in this phase of her career include Lire la vie africaine contemporaine, which was published in Senegal by IFAN, Muslim Families in Contemporary Black Africa, Femmes Africaines Emploi et Division Internationale du Travail, and a host of others. Fatou Sow's interventions had a perceptible impact on national and international organizations and venues. For instance, in the late 1970s, she conducted surveys on the economic role of women in rural Senegal for the newly created Ministry of Women's Affairs, and in 1993, she directed with Mamadou Diouf the study of Femmes Senegalaises à l'horizon in 2015 for the Senegalese government. She was a delegate at the World Conference on Women in Nairobi in 1985, in Beijing in 1995, and as an early member of CODESRA, the Council for the Development of Social Science Research in Africa that's based in Dakar, she joined its scientific committee as far back as 1987 and was instrumental in organizing high-profile academic events on gender at a time when, as progressive as CODESRA may have been, gender was not necessarily on the front burner. And so she worked together with feminist colleagues such as Aisha Imam and Amina Mama, eventually culminating in the collective volume Engendering African Social Sciences, which has been highly influential, and I, for example, continue to use it in teaching my gender courses. Even though her efforts to institutionalize gender studies at Cheikh Anta Diop University, conducted with the support of other Senegalese women scholars in the early 2000s, was not successful before her own retirement, her hard work was to bear fruit in the form of the establishment of women and gender studies programs in the late 2000s. And we all have much to thank her for the way that this has crossed across the region. Other influential publications include her article La appropriation des études sur les genres en Afrique subsaharienne, which was published by the Institut National d'Études Démographiques. In her edited volume La recherche féministe francophone, langue, identité et enjeux, forgive me, as well as in the volume Les sexes de la mondialisation, Class, Race, and Nouvelle Division du Travail, co-edited with Jules Falqueur, published in 2010. These were influential texts that are taking us into the new millennium. Committed as ever to the fight for the fundamental rights and equality of African women, Fatou Sow has remained active in coordinating and leading various influential organizations and networks after her official retirement. And of course, we all know that she's not really retired. Particular mention needs to be made of the network Development Alternatives for Women in a New Era, DAWN for short, where she served as the coordinator for Francophone Africa from 1994 to 2007, and subsequently as a board member for the Francophone Africa region, of which she was president 94 to 96. The African Feminist Forum since 2006, the London-based Network for Women Living Under Muslim Law, where she was in charge of the International Coordination Office from 2008 to 2018, and the Groupe de Recherche sur les femmes et les lois au Sénégal, GREFLS for short, the West African Office of Women Living Under Muslim Law. These affiliations are indicative of Fatou Sow's major concerns in the later part of her career, when she began to tackle questions of reproductive health, violence against women, women's mobilization and political participation, and women's rights in Africa and in Muslim contexts. After writing several articles on female mutilations in the late 1990s, she co-edited with Kudobop the RESAR collective volume Notre Corps, Notre Santé, Our Bodies, Our Health. Her numerous other publications have set the stage for frequent public appearances in Senegal and around the world, where she criticized the continuous justification of violence against women in the name of Islam. While her commentaries have sparked debate and often even controversy in the Senegalese public sphere and beyond, it is remarkable that at the same time her voice had an echo even in religious circles, where more and more protagonists have begun to speak out in support of women's rights in Islam. Her latest edited volume, Genre et Fondamentalisme, Gender and Fundamentalisms, published by Codestria in 2018, illustrates how feminist struggles in Africa are confronted with fundamentalisms of different origins and peculiarities, which are in turn closely connected to global entanglements, thus demonstrating the challenges that still lie ahead in the fight for the rights of women in Africa. Fatou Sow has not only produced enduring scholarship in her discipline, but she has also weathered quite a few storms in her unrelenting dedication to African women's studies and African feminism, and she has remained undeterred. She has made outstanding contributions with tremendous impact in the academy as well as in the public sphere, testifying to her deep-seated commitment to the critical values of the contemporary humanistic endeavor. In Akan culture, we would call her Onipa, a human being. Not every person who walks and breathes is a human being, and I am very proud to know her as ma grande sœur and to present her to you this evening as your keynote speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Akosua. That was fantastic. Also, all those wonderful pictures in the beginning. I haven't seen those pictures, so I'm really also very moved. I am pretty sure that Fatou Sow is also very, very moved. Fatou?
Bon, je demande...
Ah, voilà. Parce que je me suis dit quand même, ça serait vraiment très bien de vous voir et échanger quelques mots avant qu'on ne lance le vidéo. Ça serait vraiment trop dommage de ne pas pouvoir réagir aussi à cette introduction de Akosua. I'm sorry, I will switch back to English as I know that Fatou also understands English. So I said before we launched the video with the conference talk, I thought it might be really nice to see that you can see each other and exchange a couple of words before we start the video. Otherwise, it makes it, Zoom 200%. Yeah, so maybe you want to exchange some ideas before we start then the video.
Merci infiniment, professeur Fendler. Monsieur le président de l'Université de Bayreuth, monsieur le vice-chancelier de l'Université Moi au Kenya, ma très chère sœur Akosua, Adomako, Ampofo, nous sommes vraiment de très vieilles amies. Monsieur le professeur Rudiger Sissaman, à qui je pense je dois cette invitation aujourd'hui, Madame le professeur Albert, Madame le professeur Drescher, Madame le professeur Fendler, chers collègues, chers amis, chers parents, parce que j'ai vu une partie de ma famille présente dans cette réunion. Merci infiniment pour cette invitation. Je me sens très, très émue, hein, vraiment. Je savais que Akosua m'aimait bien, mais je ne pensais pas qu'elle me ferait le coup de sortir des photos d'un
I
séjour
didn't think that she would show me the photos of Accra, which I really enjoyed, which was a very nice celebration with my colleagues, professor colleagues, and we really had very, very nice moments. So thank you so much for that. I was very happy to have recorded this. I can't even find my words now due to the emotion. However, I'm extremely happy to be here and to discuss these studies about Africa. And so with all these changes, which we share as a center and a study object and actors and reactors that we share with the colleagues in the rest of the world. Thank you so much. When I was invited to do this conference, to hold this conference on these studies of the women, I was very happy. I accepted immediately. And we have many questions from a scientific point of view, because it is a political question and a religious question too, because the woman herself also plays a very important role in this. So when you asked me to come here to talk of the studies of the women, I accepted this voluntarily to see how women think in Africa, how women talk in Africa, to think in an African context, in a very moving context, and a context which puts everybody into the same level, with different contexts, with different ideas, but with the same problems, that we, one and the other, are linked to destiny, which is a destiny that is global and worldwide system. It's also about the way that we think in Africa and have a critical view of these answers. So thank you so much. It's us who thank you. Thank you for being here today with us.
I think this is a perfect start for a conference on African relations. We will start now the video, if you allow so. I think there will also be the link for the video in the chat. So if ever you have problems to watch it here on the shared screen, you might also watch it on your individual screens. You might because then you might have better quality. So we'll watch the conference, which is, I think, if I remember well, something like 25 minutes, 30 minutes. And after that, then we come back to join for questions and answers and discussion. Thank you very much. Et merci.
Mesdames et messieurs les professeurs, chers collègues, chères étudiantes, chers étudiants, mesdames, messieurs, quelle est dans nos universités la place d'une part des études des femmes et d'autre part de la recherche féministe dans les sciences sociales? Ces préoccupations pourtant anciennes suscitent, à mon avis, un avis fondé sur mes expériences académiques et associatives, de nombreux questionnements. Je mets un accent particulier sur l'épithète féministe, car c'est cette recherche qui est au cœur de mes propos. Il existe sur l'Afrique une masse significative de travaux sur les femmes, qui soient ou non assumées féministes. Il existe moins de disciplines qui prennent systématiquement compte de la présence et de la contribution des femmes, de l'impact des rapports sociaux de sexe ou de ce qu'on appelle la dimension genre, dimension transversale. Je pense notamment aux matières libellées scientifiques telles que les mathématiques, la médecine, l'ingénierie et autres, sans même souligner le nombre encore faible des filles et des femmes qui font études et carrière. Je me sens concernée par la part africaine dans la production de ces connaissances, dans la recherche de nouveaux paradigmes et dans l'application de méthodologies inédites dont les avancées varient selon les lieux et les contextes. Cette part africaine est prise en charge par la recherche menée dans les académies sur le continent et celle produite ailleurs dans le reste du monde. On doit admettre qu'en Afrique, cette recherche s'est déployée d'abord ou plus amplement dans les institutions anglophones. Cette différenciation linguistique, marquée sur le continent, a surtout signifié des différences de systèmes académiques qui ont inscrit ou non les thématiques des femmes, du féminisme, du genre. L'expérience des Women's Studies débute dans les universités américaines dans les années 1970. En France, à la même époque, l'Académie s'interroge sur plusieurs années sur leur institutionnalisation, malgré les importantes contributions théoriques de ces universitaires sur ces sujets. Le département d'études féministes, écrit Michel Ferrand, chercheuse au CNRS, en 2009, ces départements n'ont pas d'existence dans les universités, les revues se comptent sur les doigts d'une seule main, le financement est parcimonieux dans les organismes de recherche et les instances gouvernementales adéquates quasi inexistantes. L'institutionnalisation a donc été tardive et lente, apparaissant en filigrane ou en marge des curricula officiels et se développant dans des conditions difficiles. La crise récente des universités françaises 2019-2020 autour des questions de genre, race et classe semble en être une évidence. Ce n'est pas une expérience française, entend-on dire, dans des milieux intellectuels des plus sophistiqués. Les universités africaines francophones ont hérité de cette marginalisation sur une période encore bien plus longue. Les femmes, le féminisme, le genre et autres concepts, est-ce que ce sont des questions académiques? La production des connaissances sur les femmes et l'importance de l'analyse des rôles sociaux de sexe comme axe transversal des études des sociétés africaines ont connu des débats théoriques, les uns feutrés, les autres plus vifs. Ici, je vais éclairer le débat académique tel qu'il est entretenu dans les universités africaines. Dans ce court laps de temps qui m'est imparti, je ferai des raccourcis pour ne marquer que les grandes étapes des cheminements théoriques qui ont fait émerger la question. Les débats autour de l'histoire, autour des langues, des cultures ou de l'impérialisme, engagés au nom de la décolonisation des sciences sociales en Afrique, ont été des revendications face à des enjeux de taille que la recherche africaine a accepté et analysé à des degrés divers, car elles lui ont permis de se construire. Décoloniser la recherche sur les femmes a été un enjeu également pour les Africaines, d'une manière tout aussi évidente. La lutte des femmes contre l'ordre colonial, associée à celle pour l'indépendance, ont fait le lit de préoccupations qui ont donné matière à théorisation politique et scientifique. Elles ont été amplifiées après les indépendances par la participation à des événements majeurs, dont les grandes conférences, notamment celle de la décennie mondiale des femmes par les Nations Unies 1975-1985. Les manifestations et les évaluations menées 10 ans plus tard à Beijing 1995 ont contribué à renforcer la mobilisation des femmes et à sensibiliser l'opinion publique internationale et nationale sur les femmes, le questionnement féministe, la dénonciation plus claire du patriarcat et à problématiser les rapports entre les sexes. Les soulever et les analyser, faire accepter le genre comme outil d'analyse des inégalités engendrées par les différences entre les sexes ont provoqué une profonde hostilité, largement masculine. Fallait-il remettre en question cette pensée, le pouvoir masculin et ses privilèges? Fallait-il interroger la masculinité? Non. Cette pensée était, et continue souvent de l'être, jugée, idéologique, extravertie, occidentalisée et finalement non scientifiques. Toutes les académies africaines se sont réfugiées derrière cette parade pour nier la question. Alors, comment construire un cadre de réflexion académique? Comment assurer des recherches et des enseignements qui interrogent nos sociétés, nos États, les institutions internationales et le monde à partir de perspectives féministes? Nous avons dû poser ces questions face à des systèmes académiques aveugles à ces questions. Madame Aminata Diaw, professeure de philosophie à l'université Cheikh Anta Diop de Dakar, pour elle, l'académie, et je la cite, l'académie, pour des raisons de convention, de confort et de conservatisme, se satisfait de ce savoir et se fie à l'objectivité prétendue des concepts et analyses. Elle se fait muser en exhibant cette science de l'humain, en ne sachant pas ou en ne voulant pas savoir ce qui est ainsi offert, que ce qui est ainsi offert n'est que représentation et non représentation du réel de l'humain. Elle ajoute, l'académie est certes le lieu de l'institutionnalisation du savoir qui devient ainsi tradition, mais elle se doit aussi d'être l'habitacle de l'innovation et de la capacité de rupture. Madame Diaw écrivait ces phrases dans sa contribution à la première et seule conférence sur la recherche féministe francophone que j'avais organisée à l'université Cheikh Anta Diop de Dakar en mai 1999, à la suite d'une première manifestation tenue à l'université Laval au Québec. J'avais d'autant plus consenti à en accepter le défi, car c'en était un, que j'avais participé en 1991 au premier colloque du CODESRIA, le Conseil pour le développement de la recherche en sciences sociales en Afrique, situé à Dakar, sur l'analyse de genre et des sciences sociales en Afrique. Les actes de ce colloque sont publiés sous le titre « Engendering African Social Sciences » que Aïcha Imam, Amina Mama et moi-même avons coédité. Je participais également, en 1994, à la mise en place, avec ses deux collègues nigérianes, d'une série d'instituts sur le genre au CODESRIA. L'expérience continue aujourd'hui, comme d'autres se sont constitués progressivement pour remettre en question cet ordre académique et progresser dans la réflexion. Feminist Africa, la première revue africaine féministe en ligne, lancée en 2002, consacrait ses deux parutions de 2007 à la nécessité et à la manière de repenser les universités, Rethinking Universities, leurs formats et programmes, car les universités africaines sont les sites de production des savoirs du XXIe siècle. Dans l'éditorial de ce premier volume, Amina Mama écrivait, je la cite, « En termes politiques et idéologiques, les institutions africaines d'enseignement supérieur ont encore un rôle crucial à jouer dans les innombrables mouvements du continent pour la démocratisation et la justice de genre, justice entre les sexes. Nos académies restent fidèles aux cultures, pratiques et procédures anachroniques du passé patriarcal. Elles sont profondément méfiantes à l'égard de la demande féministe de transformation institutionnelle et intellectuelle et continuent de considérer la libération des femmes comme non africaine. » Fin de citation. Mais la production croissante et de qualité de travaux, aussi bien dans les universités que dans les réseaux et les organisations de femmes, permet progressivement, et je cite Amina Mama, d'institutionnaliser leur présence et aussi d'articuler l'agenda du féminisme africain en facilitant la recherche et l'activisme des chercheurs africaines. Fin de citation. La revue Feminist Africa a, de 2002 à 2019, publié toute une série de réflexions d'intérêt sur les politiques intellectuelles, le militarisme et les conflits, le pouvoir, les politiques du corps, genre et violence, l'engagement féministe, la sexualité des jeunes, le panafricanisme, etc. Il faut reconnaître que cet engagement des études féministes dans l'académie n'aurait pas été possible sans les actions décisives des organisations féminines dont certaines universitaires ont été membres, mais elles l'ont été en association avec des militantes de provenances diverses liées à l'histoire de leur lutte. Pour avoir vécu cette période, je peux témoigner que ce sillon s'est creusé dans les luttes des associations féminines, parties prenantes des partis politiques et ou des sociétés civiles en formation après les indépendances et progressivement dans les sphères académiques. On gardera en mémoire la première réunion continentale tenue à Dar es Salaam en Tanzanie le 31 juillet 1962 avec des femmes pionnières en politique. Ce 31 juillet devenait l'année suivante la date de la Journée internationale de la femme africaine, JIFA, saluée à la fois par l'Organisation unitaire africaine et les Nations unies. Il est évident que peu de temps après l'indépendance, l'impérialisme et le colonialisme avaient été fortement dénoncés. Mais le patriarcat, incarné notamment par les pères d'indépendance, l'avait-il été autant? C'était politiquement difficile dans des régimes de partis uniques ou dominants. Les femmes y entrent dans une norme acceptable qui ne remet pas en question les nouveaux ordres. La création à Dakar en 1977 de la FARD, Association des femmes africaines pour la recherche et le développement, ouvre plus de débats, dont le premier a porté sur la décolonisation de la recherche en sciences sociales pour une meilleure appréhension du développement en Afrique. C'était nouveau, à une époque où la colonialité d'aujourd'hui était loin d'être un débat universitaire en Occident. Les Africaines reprochaient aux Américaines et aux Européennes de tenir le haut du pavé des études sur le développement dont les femmes du Sud n'étaient que des objets. La FARD publiait en 1982 une déclaration de Dakar sur un développement avec les femmes lors d'un séminaire dont la participation venait du monde entier, Afrique, Asie, Amérique latine et Europe. Quelques années plus tard, le Forum féministe africain voyait le jour en 2006 et prônait une adhésion plus ouverte et plus forte au féminisme, adopté sans restriction en s'adaptant aux questions africaines. Un féminisme sans si, sans mais, pour reprendre le slogan inscrit dans la charte africaine des principes féministes, traduite en plusieurs langues africaines. Alors, quelle production de connaissances? Autour de quelles questions? J'insisterai surtout sur la manière de poser ou de se faire poser des questions et de nous interroger à partir de nos points de vue. Quelles sont nos représentations de nous-mêmes dans nos contextes contemporains, aux ruptures multiples et profondes? Nous sommes soucieuses, du moins nous le voulons, de la promotion et du respect de nos droits humains. L'égalité entre les sexes est un idéal de nos ambitions que nous essayons de libérer du mythe. Nous sommes, comme africaines, prises en étau entre les griffes de la mondialisation financière et de la puissance croissante des économies et des politiques néolibérales. La pandémie du Covid a accru les difficultés sans que je puisse en discuter ici. Nous sommes confrontés à des degrés divers à nos crises politiques, économiques et environnementales. Le recul sévère de la démocratie et la montée des fondamentalismes culturels et religieux ne sont pas des éléments moindres de ces crises. Parler à partir de nos contextes est donc crucial. Pouvons-nous, sans nous soucier de légitimation devant qui que ce soit, construire nos cadres de réflexion, rechercher autant des sources coloniales et mondiales du sexisme et des discriminations à l'égard des femmes que leurs sources et formes africaines? La force ou le poids du patriarcat doit s'analyser à l'aune des relations avec un matriarcat africain originel comme base des structures sociales africaines. jauger l'intersection des inégalités de genre, d'âge, de classe, d'ethnicité, de caste, de race, de religion, pour ne citer que quelques-unes subies sur le continent. Nous devons creuser ces sillons et plusieurs autres plus personnels. Le féminisme. Il faut oser en revendiquer le concept et sa critique des sciences sociales reste domaine réservé et approche contestée en Afrique malgré des avancées significatives dans le monde académique et au sein de nombreuses associations de femmes. Être féministe, ce n'est pas seulement se réclamer de mouvements de réflexion, c'est aussi assumer des revendications qui donnent tout son sens et sa puissance au concept. C'est vouloir analyser des réalités sociales dans une perspective qui tienne compte des situations des femmes, promouvoir l'égalité entre les sexes à partir de reconnaissance de leurs droits citoyens et de leurs droits spécifiques en tant que femmes. Je cite, « Cette attitude à la fois intellectuelle et politique d'appropriation d'une lutte et de nombre de ses outils n'est pas toujours facile à tenir et à entretenir dans le milieu scientifique. Elle nécessite, certes, comme pour tout outil d'analyse, des adaptations et des utilisations selon les situations. Elle impose surtout de se justifier sans arrêt face aux autres différences et oppositions de classe, de race, d'âge, de contexte historique, politique et culturel. » Je me cite en 2008 dans un article sur l'appropriation du genre par les Africaines. Nous pouvons et nous devons le faire. Je pense avec Patricia McFadden, une sociologue du Swaziland, dans une adresse à l'attention de chercheuses féministes, je la cite, « Ce sont nos compétences analytiques, incisives, nos capacités à théoriser et à conceptualiser les réalités de l'expérience quotidienne des femmes, nos compétences et techniques de rédaction et de documentation qui centrent l'agentivité et les intérêts politiques des femmes dans les processus de recherche, dans la politique et dans la prise de décision, dans la restructuration des institutions clés de nos sociétés respectives. C'est ce qui fait la différence avec les politiques nationalistes du mouvement des femmes au sens large. L'invite la plus récente est celle de Sylvia Tamale, professeure de droit de l'Ouganda, avec son récent et brillant ouvrage Internationalisation and Afrofeminism. Sylvia Tamale avance l'afroféminisme comme projet décolonial qui doit incorporer la race et la colonialité au cœur de ses débats. Pour exister et répondre à ces objectifs, l'afroféminisme doit retrouver ses racines culturelles, ontologiques et politiques afin de théoriser un genre compris et assumé sur le continent. À ce titre, Tamale exhorte les Africaines à décoloniser les savoirs et à repenser le sexe, le genre, les rapports hommes-femmes et l'universalité du féminisme. Elle bouscule tous les concepts, les thèmes et les dispositions de lutte qui en ont fait la trame. L'oppression des femmes, l'exigence d'égalité, le patriarcat et le matriarcat, la maternité, les systèmes juridiques, les législations familiales, les droits humains, le rôle du religieux, etc. L'Ubuntu est un concept philosophique qui sert de cadre de reconquête de soi, de redéfinition des rapports de soi aux autres, des relations d'interdépendance entre les humains. Je suis ce que je suis grâce à ce que nous sommes tous. En Wolof on dirait nit mooy garabam. L'humain est le remède de l'humain. Et enfin, surtout dans cette ère de globalisation, le féminisme africain sera africain ou ne sera pas. Cet ouvrage suscite assurément des débats, autant consensuels que contradictoires, qui n'ont cessé de nourrir les échanges entre féministes africaines face aux autres et surtout face à elles-mêmes. En effet, si Sylvia Tamale offre une lecture critique riche du décolonial que les Africaines n'ont cessé de théoriser en leurs termes. Comment penser et agir le féminisme en Afrique si on ne s'attache pas à revisiter et à questionner les réalités du passé, ces discriminations, ces hiérarchisations, ces relations de pouvoir entre âge, classe et également sexe. Un passé corrompu par le dessein colonial. Quand feront les jeunesses féministes africaines renvoyées aux calendes africaines pour se comprendre, s'affirmer et exister? Des travaux éminents ont fait la description des systèmes matriarcaux et des règles de matrilinéarité. Mais que faut-il en retenir pour comprendre aujourd'hui la place des femmes dans nos sociétés, dans la hiérarchie sociale et politique, dans l'accès aux ressources, dans notre monde contemporain? Quelles en sont encore les influences face aux multiples formes anciennes et contemporaines d'un pouvoir patriarcal, héritage également des religions du livre, de la colonisation, pouvoir résistant et bien réel? Nous sommes si nombreuses à refuser d'être féministes. Pourtant, les femmes n'ont jamais cessé de revendiquer leur place et leurs droits, malgré les difficultés des temps plus anciens à nos jours. Nous les honorons comme nos grandes ancêtres. Elles ne sont pas seulement les mères de nos grands hommes, elles ont, par leurs actions, changé le cours de plusieurs histoires. Nous nous devons de rechercher et de raconter leurs histoires pour les remettre dans notre histoire commune. Nous luttons pour obtenir plus de droits. Le droit à la parole, à une parole enfin citoyenne, le droit d'accéder à la terre et aux autres ressources naturelles, le droit d'obtenir du crédit sans la garantie de la terre, qui est l'apanage des hommes qui en gèrent la location. Nous avons lutté pour la scolarisation des filles, leur maintien à l'école jusqu'à l'université, l'accès à l'emploi de plus en plus qualifié, pour la mise en place des groupements d'intérêt économique et la promotion de l'entrepreneuriat féminin. Nous avons dénoncé le mariage des enfants, le mariage forcé, les difficultés d'accès à la contraception et à l'avortement, car c'est nous qui portons la grossesse. Les réformes du Code de la famille ont été des luttes de longue haleine. Le président Senghor, chrétien mais laïque, avait réussi à imposer un code de la famille unique pour tous les citoyens du Sénégal, à majorité de population musulmane. Il donnait au seul juge le droit de décider du divorce entre conjoints et offrait d'autres options alternatives au mariage, offrait un héritage également alternatif. C'était une belle victoire féministe pour les femmes, même si, hélas, la culture et la religion ont justifié et imposé leurs discriminations. L'âge au mariage redéfini, l'accès à la contraception comme décision des femmes sans que le mari ne signe l'autorisation ou que le marabout et le curé n'en donnent la recommandation religieuse sont de beaux acquis féministes. La parité a été une conquête de taille, même si l'immense majorité des hommes s'y opposent encore aujourd'hui, et que de nombreuses femmes issues de milieux populaires comme intellectuels n'en ont compris ni approuvé le sens et la portée avant son adoption. La parité avance à pas lents dans les conseils municipaux. Nous y sommes enfin représentés, et mieux que jamais. Elle avance dans les structures de l'État, mais elle avance surtout dans l'esprit des femmes. S'il est un dernier point que j'aimerais mettre en exergue, c'est le développement des fondamentalismes religieux et culturels. D'aucuns les appellent radicalisme. J'en mesure les conséquences sur la famille, les codes de la famille, dans l'espace public, les rues, les médias, l'espace universel associatif, dans la vie politique, danger pour la laïcité et confusion des pouvoirs exécutifs, législatifs et judiciaires. Il n'y en a pas d'autre contrairement à ce que l'on veut nous faire croire, mais nous imposer. Mettre la laïcité en danger, c'est faire reculer de nombreux droits que les femmes ont conquis à la force de conventions et de protocoles que les États ont adoptés. C'est sur cette note d'espoir que je vous remercie.
Je suis là, oui. Merci beaucoup, merci infiniment pour cette
So thank you so much for this very nice conference that brings us to a historical perspective with very complex histories in all these decades. However, you have finished on a hope note. So sometimes we do ask ourselves whether we still can have hope in such a world. But I wrote down a few questions, but I saw that there already are some questions in the function right at the bottom of our screen. So in the questions of answers, I'm going to read them, and I don't want to take too much of the microphone, but I will read them anyway. So I'm going to read them.
Parmi nous, hi Anne.
There is Anne Adams amongst us.
And she writes the first comment. Hello, my sister Fatou, your usual radical and sober analysis. Absolument. And then follows the question. My question is, does the increasing presence of women in African governments at various levels make a difference in the possibilities of gender studies in African universities? Il faudrait activer votre micro, s'il vous plaît.
Please activate your microphones. So I'm going to answer bit by bit. Right, so it's one or two questions, but I think we can give two answers. First of all, it's extremely important that there are more and more women in all these decision-making powers. The more we are, it'll be we can be as many dumb women as dumb men. And at this point, we will be the same, and we will maybe be able to answer a few questions. So this is, it's just a joke, but I think it is extremely important that women are conscious that they can take part at decision-making state effects upon the nation as well. I think you have to activate your microphone. Dear Miss Sow, could you please activate your microphone at the bottom by pressing on the microphone? Oh, I think it disactivates itself. Right, so the second question is, does the increasing presence of women in African governments at various levels make a difference in the possibilities of gender studies in African universities? So the study of women, so yes and no. I think the day the women will notice the role that they may play to transform the society, that means to make women's rights augment, and that men realize, and different men in different situations, that women know which rights they have and how they can discuss and how they can advance certain situations on how to take decisions, environmental decisions, economic decisions, or all sorts of decisions, social decisions. And so we just don't just have the point of view. So the more point of views we get, the better it is. So of course, we have the masculine point of view, which is the dominant point of view, because they always dominate, but they've never thought about the problems that might happen or that may happen to women and men and younger generations to come. I think this is a constant battle that we're facing. We have to make women progress. So transform the reports, transform how we go about it. So these questions are questions that we don't ask ourselves, questions that can come back again and again, and we have to find solutions that have to convey and have to be okay for the rest of the population. So thank you very much. I can see that there are quite a few questions in the chat. So the people who would like to ask questions, please go into the question and answer and ask your questions. But I can also see the questions in the chat. So there's also another question from Patricia Gudumi-Promes, who
in Brazil. There are three questions even. Okay, let's see. First question, what role do African languages play in
est-ce que les langues africaines
research? Second question, how do you see the relations between Africa and Latin America, in particular Brazil, in terms of the production of knowledge in the field of gender and feminist studies? How do you see these dialogues in terms of emancipation? And third, or maybe I'll read this later, as a gender and feminist scholar, how do you see gender and feminist studies in African schools and universities as a whole? There are three big questions.
Oui, vous pouvez répéter la première, s'il vous plaît.
La première, c'était, the first one is, what role do African
Rôle des langues,
language...
oui.
Oui.
Rôle des langues.
Mhm.
Alors, pour cette première question,
So to answer the first question, I think that the role of the African languages is extremely important to keep carrying messages, to carry them. Until now, the feminism has a concept that was born in the Occident world. So mainly they are in English, they've been taken up, they've been reconsidered into different languages, which are in European languages, French, German, etc. And for many Africans, due to their history, due to the mathematics, we have used language, European languages, to transmit messages, though nowadays we do realize, not just nowadays, but we do realize that it is absolutely essential to take up these concepts, these feminist concepts in our languages, in Pearl, in Aksal, in Swahili, in all our languages. And these are concepts that have not been translated, but have been rethought on the level of situations. So I'm going to be very fast. So I think it's a very patriarchal issue. Very patriarchal history. It's always a European who reminds me that patriarchal is a concept of a Greek concept, a Latin origin, which reminds us of the men in the times, even if nowadays we have decided that the patriarchal is the power of the male on the entire societies and on to the structures that we have inherited in the colonial Occident and in religions, as well as many religions in Univ. The patriarchal issue has a very clear significance. So if we translate the patriarchal Wolof, we have to measure it to the matriarchal and to our societies. I don't think we don't have a matriarchal situation. We have got a matrilineal, which goes from the circulation of goods, the circulation of political power. But what we can do is we make a differentiation between the role of the male and the female, which explains that this is what we understand by patriarchal when in the measure of this. Knowing that patriarchal is dominant, largely dominant in our societies, we've inherited it, but of course we do have the genes very closely englobed into our system. So the question here is Africa and Latin America. Well, I work in various organizations where we have a very, very strong presence, a massive presence of our Latin American presence. So our sisters in Latin America, our feminist movement there, their board. I have worked for more than 20 years representing Brazil, shooting, Colombia. So these are questions that are very close to our question. So what we do is we exchange our experience and we try and see how we can understand the hopes of others. So it's clear that with the user-phone, so the feminists in Mozambique or in have a very close relationship with their language, with their intercultural exchanges with Latin America, rather than with Africa, like Western Africa, the Anglophone or the Francophone West Africa. What we do have in common is our way of seeing the coloniality and to deconstruct it due to different contexts. Since nowadays in West Africa, we are independent, whereas in Latin America, we are still in a colonial process. So if we consider Latin America, it's all about freedom to the Africans who live in Latin America. So there are some questions about coloniality, which are questions that we can discuss together, where there are some links. So what happens in African societies? Okay, this is not part of our conference. We're going to discuss it anyway. So the Africans have taken up the control of this concept of gender. So we do have a concept of appreciating the gender and giving our solutions. And also we confront ourselves to various attitudes and confrontations that are either parallel or opposed to each other. However, the gender does exist in the African civil societies. So the gender, the Occidental gender has to exist. We know that in our social sciences in Africa, talk about Marcus, talk about Althusser, talk about Révérend Rose, Jean-Paul Sartre, but Simone de Beauvoir, etc., and Gleisendam, that becomes a delirium, post-colonial delirium. And there, I think that there's a different way of appropriating this concept, which we have used in various situations. Thank you very much. So there is a question. What do you think of the cleavage between the feminists and universalists interconception? Is there not a possibility to be both at the same time? So here we are used to be putting ourselves into various categories. We're in categories where we are permitted to confront problems together, but it permits us to separate also beyond the definitions, because we've got the radicals, we've got different epithets. So what I think is extremely important and what makes the link between different feminisms is in the end to have the intersectionality, which is extremely important in the societies that are here. It's one of the questions. It has a more crucial importance than in a mass of white people than if we have a mass of Black people who are in a continent, Black women and Black men. The race is going to have a different way of approach. It will be a different approach. So there are, if I'm going to answer your question, I don't know if I answer your question. However, we need to be able, in the theories that we dispose of, take elements, take concepts that permit to understand us and to work together. So the Universalists, they founded the racist. So these intersectionalists put the accent onto the race, but on the Black women who have placed accent onto the race, these colored women who are in France, actually at the moment, in Latin America or in Northern America, there is a dimension of race, which is fundamental. And here we have also the people in Maghreb, in Central Africa, in all sorts of areas. There is this question of questions that are important, and we have to consider them. And to deny these questions, in my opinion, is wrong. It would be just pure imagination to deny them. There are many questions. I don't know if we're going to be able to answer all these questions, but I'm going to continue. I'm going to try. Let's see if we can. So I see we need to go more into depth in a very close future. I think that would be the best solution. So there is our colleague from Madrid, Landry Wilfrid Miampika. Good day, Madame Fatou. Thank you for this deep confidence on the question of African women. My question is the following. So beyond the reflection of intellectual women, universal women and feminists, which are the strategies in the real life of women which are non-intellectual on a daily basis for an emancipation on the plans, cultural, educational, socioeconomical, what do they propose themselves as an object of the subject of study to emancipate of what they live? What is their way of seeing? How do they nourish the feminist African thought? So I'm going to answer very briefly. It's not a provocation. Dear colleagues, I'm going to provoke you now. The African men ask us African women that we are in the dilemma of being intellectuals. So our feet are not on the ground, are deeply based in the ground. We think without thinking about the rest. No African money who's talking about African history, of the politics in Africa, of the African questions, whether they're medial, political, or environmental. They think they're talking about for everybody. But women, you always ask them, why do they let men theorize, theoreticalize these on these poor African women who in the end are I wouldn't say that they suffer, but people do say that they suffer. So, you know, intellectuals, luxury intellectuals. So I think what we do have in common with these women, with the defense of what that is, that we are women, what we have in common is that we have the same constraints, which are the constraints of being female, the constraints of being a mother, constraints of being a wife, constraints of living in a system where the women, although centralized in the reproduction, biological and social reproduction, cultural reproduction, we have roles, specific roles. Everybody is the center of our role. I said that I am a woman in everything that's happening and everything that's happening in our country. So what we do have is this centralization that of what we are and who we are, but we do share this. And I'm just going to give you an example. It's a parity. When the parity was placed in Senegal, there were not many intellectual women who believed that this was true. However, it was a debate that came back very often with the idea that we do want to have an equality. And on the platform of Beijing, this started being a centralized question in this platform. However, when we didn't have this parity, we had this dream of intellectualism, then they're going to start dreaming. They start dreaming that they can also see in these groups, that they could see in the councils, in the department councils, and that we give them the soil that although this was only from men and young people were part of these institutions. So they really fought. What I want to say that we are together and we are fighting together, and to oppose intellectuals from rural women, say vulnerable women, poor women, that's an insult to feminism, to the femininity, I would say. That's a very nice provocation, very beautiful. Thank you so much. I can see that Rudi Zietman has lifted his hand, but first of all, I would like to read the question of Christine Vogt-William, who is the director of the Office for the Genre and Diversity of Cluster. I'm going to read it in English and we listen to the
insights. Please share your thoughts on the role of democracy as a citizenship right as regards African women scholars as knowledge producers.
La démocratie est importante pour tout le monde. La démocratie est importante.
Democracy is very important on a global aspect. So what the intellectuals have is, they've got the problem of democracy, which is the liberty of thought, the freedom of writing, the freedom of teaching, and also the freedom of thinking and to say what we think. So here, what has happened is a whole decade of liberty of the academies. So the first democratic failure in our system is the failure of the academic freedom, not to be allowed to think, not to be allowed to criticize this political system, not to be allowed to exchange ideas. That is extremely important. And I think that the intellectuals and everybody in the end. And actually, if you go to Senegal, or if you go into a lot of countries, I'm thinking of Africa, the West Africa, you know, and you can talk about the Gilets jaunes in France, or the people who are fighting in Cuba for to get the the economic life upwards, and all these fights in revolution, and the number of deaths that we have due to fighting, protesting against poverty, deep poverty. I think these are democratic questions, and it's extremely important to underline these. And everybody, the syndicates, the intellectuals, the students. The intellectuals, it's a category. I mean, many people are intellectuals. I mean, intellectuals, it's from the moment where we think, where we say we're not intellectuals because we just speak English. We're not intellectual because we're capable of using sophisticated words from Rousseau, Kant, or Marx. No, you can be intellectual because we use certain words, certain ways of thinking, because we think of Shabamba. If we take away what's being said in the discussions, philosophical discussions, we all need democracy. Africa doesn't need to be anti-democracy to develop itself. It cannot develop itself if democracy doesn't work. So this is what we have in our countries. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass the microphone to Rudiger Siesemann.
Thank you very much, Fatou. Thank you so much for this excellent lecture and the insights you shared with us. And I think the discussion we are having now shows how important this topic nowadays is in African studies. And you were instrumental in bringing it sort of on the agenda over the past few decades together with others. And this is why we invited you to the lecture today. And seeing all the other questions pouring in, I'm not sure how many Ute Fendler is going to take, but I just wanted to let everyone know that we will have a roundtable on Saturday in our program, organized by Christine Vogt-William, the director of the Office of Gender and Diversity in the cluster, together with her colleagues from the 4 African cluster centers. And Fatou will also be a discussant there. So I just want to draw everyone's attention to that event, to which you are very welcome, and which will, I think, also offer opportunities to go into more depth with regard to all these important questions. So yeah, thanks very much indeed, Fatou.
Okay, thank you, Rudiger. I think this was also at the same time a reminder that our time is over, actually, maybe. But let me take a last question at least, because there's still still a long list. But let me take a last question then, by Nana. I hope I pronounce this correctly. Nana Onua Arukwe. She asks, you made allusions to Africa's matriarchal origins in the course of your presentation. Do you think that contemporary African feminism could someday steer Africa to its roots, to some sort of neo-matriarchal system that would drive social development policy in Africa?
Désolée, mais je n'ai pas très bien compris la question. Est-ce que c'est traduit quelque part dans le chat?
Oui, bon, donc je vais essayer de. Oui, c'est dans l'interprétation.
Yes, it is in the interpretation. We have an interpreter who's translating it. So she said that you made some allusion to the origins, matriarchal systems, the societies, and she's asking whether the feminism, the African feminism, contemporary feminism, could that eventually permit to link Africa and to create maybe a kind of neo-matriarchal system that would help to develop further the social development on a political level in Africa. I understand. Thank you. Right. I didn't invent this. So So doctors and other scientists say that the social structures in Africa are matriarchally based, and they've developed this, and it's not my pretension to say this. So if today we have a look at these structures, we have some residues, which means that the maternal line exists and the paternal line exists too. And these two lines are the lines that permit to transmit the political power, the goods, and the resources. And now we come back to these elements. For example, in the transmission of the power, where partners have a family, a defined family, who also work there, and they also part of a maternal family, defined maternal family, where they can access al Khalifa, and we find them as well in more rural areas, in foresty areas, on the women, on the side of the women, on the side of the men. However, the question that we have is, what was the real assimilation to this matriarchal society? So if the matriarchal transmits political power, then if I take up the titles, the press titles, domination titles in our systems, etc., it's always the men. It's no, it's always the men. It's Damel Ducayo. It's always the men. You know, it's these are titles that are in the masculine. It's not the mother that comes to this title. So at this level, in this matriarchal linearity or matriarchal linearity, of course, Cheryl Golub and the adepts that they have, a matriarchal is not a synonym, or is not a system, parallel system to the identity of identical to the patriarchal system. We do ask several questions that we can evaluate. However, many of our African researchers who felt uncomfortable with African feminism, with European feminism, they called this the Occidental feminism. And I think that there are two icons of the matriarchal importance in our system, which smooths down European, who said we cannot have binary relations and man-female relations where the sex is not, or the gender is not something of intersectionality. But there is an intersection between the genders, and there is the ethnic. There are different, many African women went into this matriarchal system as an ideology to mark themselves against an Occidental patriarchal system, which was put into place in Nicole Cole Mathieu, who defended the patriarchal system as an instrument, as an ideology which oppresses and suffocates women, in contrary feminism, around this maternity issue, around this, the matriarchal is actually an element of, how can I say it, of a regroupment of this image of the mother, you know, for what is most sacred of the mother. So this is the prehistoric Africa. It's the pre-colonial history of Africa. Nowadays, we say 3, 5, 7 interactional systems. So what has stayed here? We only talked about neo-matriarchalism. So around this, the body of the woman, there is this ideology which has been constructed, an ideology which pretends to give liberty, freedom to women, to give them the power as a creator. But in the end, they it's not the procreation, that by procreation we control women's sexuality, we control the female, and this system of control of the female body predominates the women and what they decide to do and how they decide of what they want, etc. So here, I don't think that neo-feminism, African neo-feminism, can be found on maternity. However, we have to fight so that women can control their power of maternity, or their power of maternity in a society, and which is not in their own hands. We are just there to reproduce for reproduction. There we go. I'm sorry, but I know whenever you have to like summarize something, you have a tendency to talk. I mean, we all have the tendency to talk a lot. Of course, there are some elements that we can continue the debate. So first of all, a big thank you. And please don't leave the room, because there are still quite a little announcement that should be made now to make the transition. Maybe we'll give 2 minutes to the music before I pass the word directly to Martina Drescher, because if we had been together, there would be a lot of music, but in a Zoom call, it would be nice to just have 2 minutes of music. That would be very nice. And then please listen to the end words. So please stay with us, Machum.
Maputo, who will also be part of the conference on Friday evening for discussions. But now he will be here to play Mbira for 2 or 3 minutes as a transition, and then Martina Drescher will pick up. Thank you. Martina, may I hand over to you? Je te passe la parole, s'il te plaît.
Martina, can I pass the microphone over to you? Yes, thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Martina Drescher, and I am the historian, early career equal opportunity. And for the end of this evening, we have a surprise that is maybe not such a great surprise. However, you can maybe guess it. So the International Doctoral Grade of International Studies, BIGSAS, have unanimously decided to give the PhD, the doctorate and honoris causa, to our dear and estimated colleague, Dr. Fatou Sow. She's our second PhD doctorate researcher in honoris causa, and Huning Kangyang, who we've seen on the picture, who's also received this academic title in 2014. It's a very great honor for the members of the Dixons, and also for me as her dean, to discern this PhD to a lady who is not only a brilliant researcher, a sociologist, an international recognized sociologist for her great work, but also a teacher and activist, which has been leading for half a century an intellectual and political combat for the women's rights. Fatou has a brilliant is a brilliant writer of feminist histories of Africa with a great parcours. Her influence is not limited to French Africa, but also has a great career in various continents. This we have also seen. She has brought great contributions in scientific fields, in public fields too, with a profound impact in the feminist literature, but also inside Africa. Fatou Sow has always underlined the importance of the role and the contribution of ladies in post-colonial Africa. We have seen it now in the discussion. And to quote the link between Françoise Gergès, Fatou Sow is an important figure and incontournable figure, not just in the global Sud, but also in the feminist theory. She is also an African feminist and a feminist of the world. The author of the second report, Professor Sonia Dayan-Sabran, is also in the same direction, characterizing laureate.com as a militant, passionate for the female rights in Africa and the female rights in the entire world. An incredible personality in the first row. And I cannot even pronounce the word because she said she does not like the word, but she has the first row in the intellectual Africans, if I may say so. We also have a great honor to give homage to an incredible woman, to give the doctorate, the PhD honoris causa, and I will quote what has been written to her in thanks to her exceptional exploits in African feminism and her incredible engagement for the cause of the women in Africa. The only regret that I have nowadays is that we cannot celebrate Fatou Sow as we would like, which means with a presidential ceremony, which would be dignified for this event, which would permit us to reunite physically to be able to celebrate this wonderful event. But this will only just be postponed. I am so happy to find all of you here in Bayreuth once the coronavirus and the restrictions that have been imposed will be in part of the past. And I am sure that this celebration will take place in 2022 at the latest. And now I invite you to all give a great applause to Fatou and to be amongst us this evening. Thank you very much. Also prepared a bit of music to finish the nice evening, but maybe you would like to just end it in a few words before we give the place to the music. Otherwise, we just put the music on and we dream of this event, which will be in the future. I am so full of emotions right now. I have difficulties finding my words right now. I would like to give a great thank you with a very, very lots of humbleness. My PhD in honoris causa that you've just offered me, I am very, very happy and that you have discerned this, and thank you so much. Thank you so much. I thank you in the name of Africa and in the name of African women who are fighting that their voices can be heard, that their thoughts can be heard and shared as a debate on the same level to equality that we can share together. Thank you so much. Thank you for this PhD. Thank you, Dr. Drescher. Thank you to everybody. Just thank you. Thank you, Akosua. Thank you so much. And I would like to give a great thank you to all my friends that I told this morning between 23 p.m. and at night and 2 in the morning. I was sending like translations, links, etc., because I wanted that my friends and my family would share this honor with me. I can see several names that are here. I see some names that have just shown up. So thank you so much for being here today, my family. And this PhD, I'm dedicating it to my grandchildren, to Menelik, to Simel, to Maiko, to Sarael, and to Dokaya. I love you. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's an honor for us that you have accepted this PhD in honoris causa, and we're totally emotional as well, and we are touched by the fact that you have accepted it, and that we can count you part of the PhD, part of the doctors that are here who have their doctorate. So I have nothing more to say for the moment. I'm going to pass place to the music, and it'll be the moment of coming out of this big room. So now that we were going to occupy together next time in live, thank you so much again for this very nice evening, for the communication, excellent communication. There is so much applauses and bravos in the chat. And we're going to see each other again in the next 2 days. So thank you so much again. Thank you. Thank you. Machung, a bit of music to finish, please.
I hope you can hear perfectly the sound of the beer because it's more louder.
Yes.
What's there?
It's louder. Thank you. Obrigada, Machum. Merci beaucoup encore une fois pour cette belle ouverture.
Thank you again for this nice opening. Thank you again. I hope we can see each other again in the various sections tomorrow morning. Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.
You can go to the conference promenade. It is open. And congratulations, Fatou. I'm really delighted. I'm really moved glad it has worked out. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so goodbye. And see you tomorrow.
Merci. Bonne soirée.
Merci.
Thank you.
Bonsoir.
Have a nice evening. Bye.